So is there going to be a link to this I can put on my Discord?
Yeah. I think here. Let me see if I can hit this over to you here. One sec. So yeah, I gotta adjust something too. We're going live here. Let me turn on all these settings and stuff. I'm getting used to. It's like still getting used to all that. All right. So let me get the. Just go to. Where's the link? What do I do with the link? Oh my god. We're Twitch just the RPG Club. So let me type it in. I can send it over to you.
Yeah, it changed from D&D Club during
Yeah, we switched it
all
over
the
because we're
drama.
doing the rebrand here. Boom. All right. So I'm just gonna shoot it in the general chat to you because actually I'll Discord it to you. There we go. I'll put it on the Discord.
Cool.
Okay. Ping. Here we go. So yeah, we hadn't really talked since I think the last time we talked, you were in like extensively. You were in town.
Yeah, we went
We're in the
to
Dayton area.
had coffee in Dayton.
Yeah, we had some good coffee at Searchlight Coffee. I forget what the place was
That's
called.
right. I think you're
What
right.
was
It was backstage? I don't
backstage?
know. It had something to do with lights, but it had like a production thing to it, like backlight, backlot, something like that. I don't know.
It was. I'm just glad we get a chance to talk again.
Me too.
Because it's like in this remote world that you and I find ourselves in, it can feel very isolated. So, remind me, how many games are you running now again? We were
I'm
talking
running
about that
8.
before. You're running 8
games a week. Most of them are with RPG Club. Then
Yeah,
I've got a couple that I'm just still with
I
Start
start
Playing Dead
playing.
games just
Yeah,
because that's been going on for so long and that's what the
sure.
people are familiar with.
Yeah. So, how are you? How are you finding the process of? We were talking about kind of before we just clicked the go live button. You're a professional performer by trade. How are you finding doing this a lot more with the role playing experience compared to the performing life? Because you said that there's kind of a transition in your life that's happening,
Sure.
maybe almost just inadvertently, just kind of through the nature of life.
Yeah, I
So I'm
mean,
curious how that's
just
going.
it was a combination of conscious decision to really like when I started going from just a couple of games a week to really think, okay, this is going to be the majority of what I'm spending my week on. Um, that and then the with the pandemic and so many theaters closed for a while, and then just where I am in my uh, just where I'm in my professional life. You
Yeah,
know, the new hotness is coming along, and the old hotness is not as hot as it used to be. And so I mean, I will never not want to perform on a stage. I think once you're bitten by that bug, it's for life.
sure.
Um, and watching on Facebook and on Instagram and on a bunch of places, I see a lot of it's a very similar point in my life with a lot of other people who professional performers, actors, singers, um, that like just realizing that okay, it was fun in the 20s to go out to travel all over the country and all over the world and sleep on people's couches for auditions and have a new family every time you do a
Yeah,
show and all that. But as you get older, that sort of it loses its sheen. And that said, it's still very, it's still a lot of fun and still something, I've spent a lot of time cultivating those skills. And so I hope I get to use them. And there's a lot of shows that I've dreamed of doing that I haven't yet gotten a chance to do. And some of those were not appropriate when I was younger. And so now that I'm getting older, more fitting more into my wheelhouse. So one would hope that somebody at some point would hire me to do that. But that said, I'm really scratching a lot of that itch through DMing games. Um, you have to come up with a lot of NPCs, and I put a lot of
yeah,
theatricality into my games, and I spend a lot of time creating cinematic. It's not really cinematic's not really the right word, but cinematic esque or theatrical maps, music, sound effects, and all of that is part of being creative and being and performing. And that
Sure.
was what really was it for me. I really enjoyed performing. I really enjoying having a process where I got to create something and realizing that as long as those two criteria were met, then I would be happy. Then, the idea of traveling and being away from home for 3 to 6 weeks at a time, um, begins to lose its appeal. So,
Yeah.
I'm able to do this from the comfort of my own home. And yeah, sometimes I'm in this room for long periods of time, and my my wife and daughter don't see me anyway, but I'm still
Sure.
here, and so I can, I still am able to help out with the various things that need to be helped out. And my wife and I joke that when I stopped performing as much, she's like, "Well, maybe the foundation of our relationship has been the fact that you do leave, and I get to have a break from you. What's it going to be like when we don't get a break from each other?" And so far, I'm happy to say it's worked out. So
I totally understand that. Since I've started working more from home, since I left the classroom and now work full time, I have an office, but I'm home.
right,
My wife and I find that we both get along better most of the time, but we also have some really stressful fights because she's like, "You're just home up my stuff all the time. And this is my office. Like, why are you still here? Like, go, don't you have something to do?"
right,
And the tension can get pretty high. That totally resonates. I think that's a change that maybe we're seeing in the way we work now with
yeah.
the remote
I'm
world.
sure it's not just me. Um, and over the summer, my wife was able to work 2 days a week from home. Uh, and it's huge. It changes everything.
Yeah,
And mostly for the better, I think. But there's a couple of things that are changes, and they do take an adjustment. So while you're in the adjustment phase, it's easy to say, well, maybe this isn't better. This is different. Is it better, or is it just a more of the same, just in a different format?
sure.
But
Yeah, it's given me a lot of perspective on the work my wife does at home because when I'm able to actually go into my office and close my door and not have to manage all the things that she manages, it's so much easier than what she has to do. Just
yeah,
doing my work is so much more simple compared to
yeah,
the stuff she deals with. She's keeping people alive, and there's kids running around the house, and there's kids in the yard, and there's people on zip lines, and dogs escaping the backyard, and I'm just in here, and I'm like, what
I'm
kind of fun
working.
little
Don't bother
yeah,
me. I'm
what
working.
kind of fun? I'm doing elf voices. Get out of here.
This is
So
important work I'm doing.
we're changing the world in here. You mentioned before we came on that I think that your father was a performer. I'm
Yeah,
curious about that. So you
yeah. My
came from a lineage of
mhm.
stage and screen heritage.
Stage. Yeah, my father, incredible story of growing up as a cotton farmer in really rural Mississippi, and he discovered that he had a voice and was able to get training and became an opera singer. And I was born in New York City while he was pursuing that, and he had a little bit of a career, and then went into academia, teaching opera, and opera performance and also vocal performance. I did that for the rest of his career in Ohio, and I got into it through that. And again, it was even then, I think, you know, for me, it seems inevitable. But if you're exposed to theater, I think at a certain range of age, it's you realize that you can just basically make believe for the rest of your life.
Sure.
Pretty hard to pass that up. At least it was for me. Um, and so I went into theater, and I tried a bunch of things. I tried musical theater. I tried for a while there. I did a couple of apprentice programs as a Shakespearean actor because I really love Shakespeare. But because of my physiology and also just being exposed to it growing up, opera seemed to be the logical choice if I wanted to have a career as a performer. And that was the thing. I wanted to perform, and I was willing to sort of try and see what medium was going to give me the best chance at that. And so that's why I went into opera. I went to school for it, did a couple of very prestigious um, apprentice programs, and then went in and began a professional career with it. And I
Y-
did that for about 20 years.
Yeah.
Just got to travel, got to see amazing things, do amazing performances, very fulfilling, and I don't regret a single minute of it. But things have changed. So, and if I didn't have anything else, I would be. I'm sure I would have at some point. I would have gotten a temp job or gone into some sort of office job. I
Sure.
knew I didn't want to do academia. I knew that, and so it was either going to be performing or something else, and I was going to try and perform as a hobby.
Yeah.
And but I think I would have been miserable in an office job, just doing, data entry or acquisitions or what have you,
Yeah.
some important corporate sounding word.
I would be too. I did that for
So
about 6 months in the insurance industry, and that was not I'm glad that I'm not doing that anymore. Let's leave it there. You mentioned physiology in terms of you
oh
found
yeah.
yourself
Well,
more
not everybody has the right. Um, I believe anybody can sing, provided you haven't damaged the apparatus. But if you have a certain physiology, it lends itself a little bit better to operatic singing. And my dad had that, and I inherited it from him. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it makes a little bit of
It
difference.
helps.
And so, if you're born with the right proportions, for whatever
So you're
reason, then
speaking more vocal characteristics to be
yeah,
able to project well.
yes.
Okay, because I was curious if it was a specific look, a specific style of. So I know opera is a different style of singing necessarily than
Mhm.
musical theater. One thing we do have in common loosely in the arts is my sister. I think I've told you this. I'm not sure. My sister was trained as an opera
Oh
singer
yeah,
at
you did tell me
Northwestern.
that.
Yeah, and
That's great.
she didn't go on to pursue it, but for my whole childhood and then through her college years and shortly thereafter, she was trying to make it in that world and ended up going a different direction. So I certainly have an appreciation for how difficult it is to do the kinds of things that you do as a singer, but as an opera singer specifically, it's not just you're not just singing. There's a whole
No,
range of things going on.
there are many similarities to being an athlete because it's so caught up in your body and your health.
The body
And
is the
yeah,
instrument.
exactly.
You're not just saying, you're not going up on stage and doing a production of Music Man and just singing a
Well, I
tune.
mean, a good production
That's
of
hard.
Music Man
That's very
requires some
hard.
athleticism
I
too.
mean, yeah, I mean, I couldn't
So
do
it's
couldn't do
not
either
just
of those.
opera. It's all performing. I think the better better kinesthetics you have, the more effective you can be as a stage performer.
What's your favorite role you've done so far in your career?
Well, that's a really hard question.
Top three. What have you
Top.
enjoyed? Just it comes to top of mind where you're like, oh man, I really
I
liked that.
enjoy doing comedies. I enjoy making people laugh, and so I've gotten to do a lot of lighter opera, a lot of stuff that I wouldn't say it goes quite so far as slapstick, but it definitely gets into the Mel Brooks level of comedy sometimes. And so I've done a performance of HMS Pinafore that was tremendous fun. We tore the roof off every time we performed that. And it was just a combination of really good performers, really great staging, cool set, and all that. Um, I That said, as much as I enjoy comedy, the time to really bring some pathos is very special, and I got to do an operatic performance of Mice and Men that just wrecked me, and I feel like really was able to make the audience feel the tragedy of that particular story really well. Um, you know, the more you do it, and I think that I share this with a lot of other performers. Um, the real answer to that question is that my favorite opera doesn't actually exist because it's less about the piece, although I do have pieces that I music that I love. Um, it becomes more about the people that I performed with, and so I want to bring all of my favorite people that I've worked with from all these various places that we had that connection. We had that really
Sure.
great just, and it's one of those things, and I see this reflected in role playing games also. You can have all of the conditions uh, primed to have a really great game. You know, the DM can be really prepared, can know the information really well. The players can all be experienced, can all be really ready to play. Everybody's cleared their schedule and they're really into it. But sometimes the magic doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do to make it happen. You can create the circumstances in which it does happen, but what actually makes that happen, it's a mystery. I don't know what actually causes that spark to catch flame. And it's the same with performing. You know, I've been in shows that had no budget, that had no right to be anything more than just, there's another performance of La Boheme. Um,
Yeah.
but for whatever reason, the combination of the people involved and the energy that they had and all that, it clicks, and you form a rapport with each other, and the audience picks up on that. So you have the rapport as a group, and then the audience picks up on that rapport, and you have that rapport with the audience. And then by the same token, I've been in productions that had huge budgets, that had big name singers that you think, there's no way this is going to be spectacular, and it's good, but it doesn't have, at least for me, doesn't have that same, um, energizing
Yeah, there's
spark.
something about the connection between the
Je ne
people.
sais quoi. So it's, again, you create the circumstances and hope for the best, but it doesn't always happen.
That really connects with, I think, a lot of the work we do with role playing in terms of
Yeah.
finding the right people to have a special moment. And there's questions I get about the work we do in the professional space from people who are new to it, saying like, well, is it going to be, how many technological tricks are you going to basically perform? You know, or is it going to have a great soundtrack, and is it going to look really cool? And I try to educate people and say, most of the time, from my experience, it's just about the people and having people who can connect and create a good environment. And the GM's usually the host, and the better that they're able to help everyone feel comfortable. You know, you can have an awesome game with minimal material as long as you get everybody comfortable. And I think that's what I see with, like, I spend a lot of time just in all of the different beginner forums online, seeing kind of what people are asking questions about. And the topic of Critical Role comes up a lot because it's so present. And I think beginners associate Critical Role as, that's what I want my D&D game to look like.
Well, that's a perfect case in point, because that's a group of professionals who, yes, now they have a tremendous budget and resources that they never dreamed of having when they first started. But it started as a group of people who had that connection, who created that spark together with just people sitting around a table with paper, and and that rapport and that family. That's what people pick up on while they're watching, and that's, I mean, any D&D game or any RPG game has the potential to be that, but it's not something, that it can only go so far as what one person can do, say the GM, and it really comes down to, again, things you can give tips, you can say, don't do this, do this, and you can have all of that and create the environment. You can create the agar for the petri dish for the bacteria of the good game to grow, but it doesn't necessarily grow. There's nothing to say that it will or it won't. I mean, there's certainly things you can do to make sure it doesn't grow, but even if you do everything right, it might not work out. But yeah, I mean, and things like Critical Role and Dimension 20 and all that, I mean, that's akin to like going down to your playground after having watched the NBA, seeing all these amazing athletes and wondering why nobody's dunking, or why nobody's able to do the amazing things that you saw in the game last night. The people, those are skills that
they're
take,
professionals. They're friends. They're groups of friends who are professionals, but there's a skill set and a camaraderie that's been built over time. And that, I think that's the thing that really is nice about role playing, is it provides that social experience people are looking for. And I think some of the challenges that I've seen, at least that I've encountered, is when someone comes to the role-playing game world and looks at it as they come from a video game RPG background and they want to play World of Warcraft, and they have main character syndrome, which can be a little bit of a challenge when you are trying to mesh everyone together. So I think that can be an impediment, but I also think it's a chance to educate and bring people in and talk about what the hobby is. And
yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about that with my session zeros and make sure everybody understands that it's the way this game is fun is when it's a group game, when everybody feels like the group is, when you are as invested in other people's stories as you hope they're invested in yours.
Yeah.
And that's hard. As you know, the times I've played, I sure focus mostly on my character.
Oh yeah.
But it takes skill, and it takes time, and it takes a long game, actually, I think, for people to really get involved in, you know, for people to come out of their shells and actually begin to develop stories and develop plot lines that capture the interest of the group. And again, that's something that you can create the circumstance to have happen, but if you know, if it's not ready, if it's not ripe, it's not ripe, and you just keep on going. And I always make sure, as a DM, if it feels like we've been spending a lot of time with one person's particular story, or a couple of people who are having an intense moment, I'm always take the time to say, okay, we're going to pause this for a second and check in with everybody else, make sure everybody is into this.
Where's the group at?
Yeah, where's the group at? Or do we need to pause this and take some time with the rest of the group?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's hard.
It is, but vital, I think. Otherwise, you get people who have come and realized they've just spent 3 or 4 hours taking part in a game, and basically, you know, they didn't get to do anything.
That is a challenge that, especially in the professional space, can be very hard, because everyone is, I think, through the nature of paying for a game, they're very committed to wanting to engage in the game. And so that can be a very hard, I don't want to say line, because it's not really a line, but it's a very hard balance to strike. Rico just showed up. Hey, Rico, how are you?
Hey, Rico.
Glad you're here. By the way, everybody here, Barry's here too. Hey, Barry, good to see you. If you guys have questions for Sean, or if there's anything you'd like us to address, it could either be role-playing related or just other topics, that you'd want to join in on or have us kind of speak to, just wherever you'd like to go with this. These are always some of my favorite moments of the week, because the rest of the week I spend behind a computer doing things that are not as fun as this. So, so just being able to talk to you, Sean, is really, I've been looking forward to this. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate everybody else.
Happy to be here. I was able to take a week off last week. I went and visited my family, and while I certainly saw them a lot and did a lot of things with them, I was also able to spend time prepping for games and such. So I actually feel on top of things. I feel like I've got it. I wanted to get back early enough so that I could run a game last night, and it just didn't work out. So other than that, I'm anticipating a really good week of really being on top of things. I've kind of, as the DM, for me, I create my A, my B, and my C in terms of potential that the what's going to happen in that session. And so I've got everything worked out.
It's a good feeling.
It is a good feeling. I hope it lasts. I hope I can stay on top of it. I would like to stay on top of it, as opposed to that feeling of panic as the hours tick by and you realize that you've got so much work to do in the game that's coming up.
Yeah, or even worse, you're in the game and you're getting toward the end of the prep, and it's like,
don't go through that door.
Don't go there. There's nothing there.
All there is a painted backdrop.
just somebody, a gaffer holding a mic.
Yeah, exactly.
Go the other way. I think something I would enjoy hearing you speak to, because you're really on the ground with this emerging profession of professional GM, professional. I mean, it really is professional entertainment, but it's also, I do think it's more than that, because you're providing a space for people to really connect and develop relationships. Entertainment can be a nature of connection, but sometimes it's a one-sided medium where it's consumed. But I think that what we're doing, mainly what you're doing and what the other GMs do in this space, is create a place for people to be together and connect together. I get a lot of questions from people asking me about how to do what you do and how to become a professional in this space. And you do this a lot. And I mean, you really are doing something that is, from my point of view, other than, there's the service to the market that we have where we serve lots of players. You're at the top of that. You're at the top of that tier in terms of working with people, connecting, and you have the technological side, you have the performative side. But what should people be thinking about if this is a profession they are interested in? Where do they start? Because it can seem very daunting. DMing is challenging enough.
Yeah. I think as far as professional, I have not done any professional DMing around an actual table. I love playing around an actual table, but I can't remember. Actually, no, that's not true. I do get the chance to play around an actual table with a game that is being run by a friend of mine, and he runs it for his son, for me, and my daughter. So I get that aspect of it. But I think, yeah, familiarizing yourself with the technology to a certain extent. You don't have to become an expert in it. And some of it, there's some out there that are really simple to use that you can master with just watching a few YouTube videos. There's tricks and things that you can learn and get better at as you go. But in terms of like the most basic things that a virtual tabletop is, it can be pretty easy to learn. So once you've learned that, an ability to express and engage through a video format like this, really, whatever you can do to help people forget that they're sitting in their room with a screen, if that means having a background,
Yeah.
or using music that you've carefully cultivated, or curated, I should say, or spending time creating maps, and that again, there's a lot of maps you can get for free, but I take the maps, and this is all stuff that I've developed over the few years I've done this. You take the maps and you put them into Photoshop and change things, get the lighting just a little bit better, or put in props that you definitely want your players to see,
Yeah.
interact with, or maps that phase so that when they do one thing, like there's a big explosion and then the map changes and you see all the rubble from that explosion is now in the room, and all that things like that. It just, you keep building your skills, keep adding, think of it as a blank stage that first thing you need. Okay, the first thing you need is a performer, and the performer has to be heard, so it has to be seen. So you need to be good at that aspect of it, and then you start adding set pieces, and you start adding backgrounds and backdrops and music and lighting, and eventually you've got a good thing going. And then finding that balance between, and that this applies not just for being a professional DM. This is for any kind of DM. Is finding that balance between guiding and following. And make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time and feel like, I should have let that go on a little bit longer. I cut it off too soon, or, I should have realized that they were going to ask a question. Exactly. Rico's absolutely right there. You reuse assets. Absolutely. If you make a map that you feel really good about, and you say, okay, here, this is my map for this. And you realize in a pinch, somebody has zigged when you thought they were going to zag. So you take that map out again and, I don't know, maybe turn it on its side, 45 degrees, and look, brand new map. Rico's amazing at making maps. He makes his maps from scratch on Incarnate, which is something I've yet to master. I usually find maps online or on Patreon and then put them into Procreate and sort of kit bash them together to create exactly what it is I'm looking for.
You've been speaking, and Rico's also, he's a player in your games, but also Rico is a GM for RPG
Fantastic
Club.
GM.
I believe Rico may still have some games on Start Playing as well. So Rico's doing this professionally as well, which is, I think it's really interesting to see.
He's actually one of the ones that really encouraged me to hang out my shingle as far as this is concerned, because I
Were
was
you
playing.
in? So you were in his game. You
Mhm.
were playing in his game, and then he said, "Hey, you should try this."
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's pretty much what happened. I think I had already made this decision to sort of give it a shot, and then he spoke to me privately after one of our games and said, "Listen, I really think there's things you got to get better at, but you
Yeah.
really have the mental state, or the whatever it is that you need to really do this." I remember that conversation very well, and I took it and I ran with it, and and then there came a time later on when I got to encourage him as well, because it's really easy to get burned out as far as this is
Oh yeah.
concerned, and you find your balance in terms of your personal life and when you're working on games and how many games you can run in a week and all that. And I think there was a point where I encouraged him. I think I encouraged him to join RPG Club and said, this, the structure and the reliability of these various players and such. It that's how you build this into a profession, as opposed to just uh a hobby that pays for itself.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point of
Hmm.
delineation, because I think a lot of people think I can just do something that is fun. They want to do the thing that is fun, and
Hmm.
they want to get paid for it, which who doesn't? That's a great
Hmm.
thing. But what you've just been speaking to is it's a lot of skill that's involved, and it's not just all at once. It's a layering of skills
Hmm.
that takes place over time.
It helps to have somebody pushing you to develop those new
Sure.
skills, and I'm fortunate to have several people like that, and they know who they are, for making sure that I know that that just when I'm feeling comfortable in something, they say, "Well, okay, yeah, so you've gotten good at this," and it's actually that's a very common thing in performing as well. I went through that when I was really learning to sing with my teacher. would I would work really hard to get something, and then it would like, I got it, and only to realize that by figuring that out, that no, okay, now you see that beyond that, that's not the peak of the mountain. That's just the
Yeah.
beginning of the next valley that leads to the even higher mountain. And so, and the you can keep it. You can perfection is unattainable,
Sure.
thankfully, and you can keep on forever trying to get better at it. But it's very easy to get to a point where you say, "Well, yeah, I'm good enough as far as this is concerned,"
Yeah.
and then you get complacent, and before you know it, the technology has passed you by. And boy,
Yeah.
the older I get, it gets harder, harder. I think it's likely that 5 to 10 years from now, the format's going to start moving over to a three-dimensional map. And I have there's good things and bad things about that, but I can
You mean like virtual
see,
reality type
well,
of
not virtual reality.
experience?
I'm thinking more of a three-dimensional map, a three-dimensional map, like on Tailspire, or some of the stuff that
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
been advertised for 1D&D and all that. I don't know how that's all going to go down. I do know that while there was never it can never be a substitute for sitting around an actual table and playing D&D, that there are things about playing virtually that are an improvement. The biggest one that comes to mind for me is the dynamic lighting. When I played D&D growing up around a table, you would take a class that had infrared vision or dark vision, and it was always like, "Oh, it's lame." We never use it,
Sure.
because you have a map on the board, and if the DM puts a monster at one end of the map, I mean, how good are you really at pretending you can't see it if you're
Yeah. Yeah.
human?
Oh, I don't know what's
Or
there.
I don't know what's there. And as the DM, I always forgot which characters had dark vision. It's just, there's so many things to think about.
Minutia. A lot
That's
of
one
minutia
thing that
to
you
avoid.
don't remember. Um, it's especially hard if you're doing something that's in the theater of the mind's eye. But with a virtual tabletop, you can set all that, and dynamic lighting really makes people realize, it's very rare now to have a game that doesn't have most of the players in my games usually choose a race that's got some kind of dark vision. It's very rare not to. And the same thing with a three-dimensional space, which is essentially, it's more complicated, but when you really come right down to it, it's Minecraft. It's using Minecraft to create a Dungeons and Dragons map that people can interact with and move around in. And I don't know that the technology is quite there to make it as customizable as a virtual tabletop is, and maps for virtual tabletops are right now, but it will get there eventually. And the idea
it
of
does seem like we'll get there soon
having
in the near future.
having different levels, and being able to craft combats and maps that take advantage of different elevations, because that's one thing that's very difficult to show on a two-dimensional map, where you have a cliff and you say your enemies are up here and they're firing down at you. It's very easy for the people who are down there to look on the map and say, well, there's enemies up there. But if you had that three-dimensional space, it becomes a lot more important than, okay, well, who's got levitate, who's got fly,
we can get up there.
Your strategy for moving through a map, again, with the same way dynamic lighting changes people's strategies and changes the experience. A three-dimensional space does that as well. So that, I think, will be a big factor going forward in terms of online RPGs. And I kind of feel like I'm just now getting the hang of there's so many people who are better at handling virtual tabletops than I am. Rico's one of them. He knows, he was using Roll20 way before I did it. He knows all the ins and outs of it. But I bet even he would admit that there's people who know how to use it better than he does. So it's one of those things. So looking now at the idea, okay, well, now I have to learn a whole new system and build maps and get fluent in this creative medium of building three-dimensional maps. It's a hard pill to swallow, but that's the inevitable march of progress, isn't it?
It's trying to figure out how to use it effortlessly or seamlessly with what you're doing as well. Because when we're by ourselves sitting and messing around with it, it's very easy to say, or at least for me, oh, I can do this. And then suddenly there's 5 people at a table or in the Zoom call or on Discord, and you're tracking all this stuff.
Please hold.
Like, I don't know. I have the map on. I don't know what's going on. You forget to add that extra element, and doing that with some comfort can be, I think, really important. Barry Bot here asked a question here. Barry said, any fun or recent events that have happened in your campaigns? This is to the both of you. Sean, why don't you go for this, man? What's happened in your campaign that's sticking out? Because you got a whole bunch of campaigns.
Well, one of my games, the game I'm running tonight, actually, last week we're doing Storm King's Thunder. I don't want to give too many things away, but there's a point in Storm King's Thunder where you have to get to the Oracle. You have to get to an Oracle, and there's a way to do it. But there's also bad things that happen if you do it wrong. And I've never had a group actually do the things that cause the bad thing to happen. And they did exactly the thing that you shouldn't do. I don't know if any of them were watching. They figured, they know now not to do that. I'll tell you that much.
Yes.
Yes. Finally. But I was unprepared. I got there in a second where they realized, I was like, whoa, this is actually happening. All right. Okay. What does this spell do? And I had to, that was exciting. Let's see. And I think it was that same game. I had made a mistake with my games. I always say, if I make a ruling or if I make a mistake that is shown to be a big deal, as opposed to, oh, well, I made that mistake, we'll fix it next time. But if something critical happens as a result of that mistake, or even minorly critical, I will always make it up to the group somehow by rather than going back and undoing what has happened 2 rounds ago, moving forward and saying, okay, well, you have advantage on this roll, or we're going to do this is an automatic critical to make up for what happened, something, that sort of thing. And I had confused one spell with another, and so somebody was incapacitated for a turn when they shouldn't have been, and one of the players died. One of the players died. Their character died. So a tense moment, and it was then I realized that, like, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and make another death saving throw? Since obviously we can't know what would have happened if that round of incapacitation hadn't happened. It might have made the difference. So you failed your death saves, you're dead, but you get an extra death save this round, just to sort of see whether or not. And he rolled a natural 20, and so he came back to life. It was a very exciting moment. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Do you follow boxing at all? Professional?
You know what I did when I was younger? I watched boxing with my dad, but I haven't followed it recently. That's for sure.
Have you heard of the heavyweight fighter Tyson Fury?
I've heard of Tyson Fury, but
Tyson Fury. I think this was a few years ago. He's called the Gypsy King, and he's this very brash, outspoken guy, and I think he's like 6'9" or 6'10", huge, just a true monster of a man. I mean, just like, he's the guy, the first guy off the boat 2,000 years ago, jumping off the boat with the battle axe, and everybody just runs for the hills. But he was fighting an American by the name of Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder, up to this point in his career, he just basically had hammers for hands, and he was also huge. He's 6'6", 6'7". These are just beasts of men. And he threw this punch where he just literally sent Tyson Fury into the shadow realm and knocks Tyson Fury down. Tyson Fury's flat on his back, just looking up, and you can like see his eyes trying to recalibrate. And this was for the heavyweight championship. And everyone thought Tyson Fury was like done for. I mean, his brother's like in his corner crying, like, "Oh my God, my brother, first time ever really has been knocked down. This is just a tragedy." And then, the referee's going 7, 8. And he gets up at 8, stands up, brushes his gloves off, and he's ready to fight. And then he knocks out Deontay Wilder minutes
like
later.
that.
So just like that.
Yeah. And I've got another game, my longest running game, and it's likely going to run in. This is one that Rico plays in, likely going to run into higher levels, which is daunting. I think any DM will tell you that most games end somewhere around level 11 and level 12. And this one, we definitely plan to take as far as anybody wants to keep going with it.
Take it all the way.
Yeah. And so I'm looking forward to that. I think that's definitely going to take me out of my comfort zone. But, that's a whole different layer of strategy in terms of how do you actually challenge these superheroes that have these abilities that can negate a encounter with a single spell. How do you raise the stakes, or what do you put into the game that makes it a challenge? And so far I feel pretty good about it, but it's only going to get more and more intense with each level. So looking forward to that, but also a little worried about it. But we had some really great role-playing sessions lately with that group, with the people who are dealing with the effects of a gruesomely cursed item that is has a very strong grip on one of the players, and as a result, it's affecting the whole group, and it leads to some great drama if you lean into it. And I find that a lot of times, like, I really enjoy creating situations where the consequences lead to, in short-term, long-term, and even indefinite madness, where it actually has an effect on the character, and they have to figure out a way to incorporate that change now into how they RP their character. And some players are really good at it, and some, don't. It's hard for them to remember it. So it's tried to figure out, okay, well, if this is a person that's really going to lean into this madness, then it works. Then it's worth doing. But if this is somebody who is not really going to remember it, is not really going to play it, and said, well, okay, so maybe it should be a more immediate consequence as opposed to an RP consequence. Maybe if it's bad enough, maybe they lose a level, or maybe they lose ability score. That's the sort of thing. Okay, that has a tangible, actual physical result that it's reflected in the math, as
direct,
opposed to
mechanical loss.
Yeah, direct, exactly. And that's a case by case basis, of course.
How do you find players to deal with bad things? And I don't mean just like, oh, I failed a roll and took a little damage. I'm talking about things like, either character death or losing a level, 'cause it can be very
Yeah,
challenging.
I
I
think
find it interesting, but
yeah,
worked with so many players. I'm curious as to what you've experienced.
I definitely have players who, from the get-go, regardless of how much time and effort they've put into their character, are completely embrace the fact that bad things can happen, and there's no save. You can't restart this level. Uh,
You
and
can only
it's
load
one of
them.
the things that drives RPGs, tabletop RPGs, and makes them different from uh, video games. Um, there are consequences, and the consequences stick around.
Yeah.
Um, so I do have players who are 100% on board with that from right at the very beginning, and then there's others that takes a while, and it really just takes experience, and it takes understanding that if a bad thing happens, that it's just another step in the story. Um, say a character dies, and then there could be a situation, I might run a brief little moment where they're heading to the afterlife, or on their way to the afterlife, they get propositioned by a devil, or say the somebody resurrects them using revivify or something like that. Well, what effect
Yeah.
does that then have on their character to realize they've been dead and they're brought back by this person? What relationship, how does that change your relationship with the cleric, or the druid, or whoever has just brought you back? um or are you now, do you believe in their faith now, or do all these various other things that come up? And or if that is the end of the story for that character, realizing the effect that it then has on the rest of the players, and they may look towards the person who ended up killing that person, especially if that person gets away. That's now a character that they have a really visceral reaction to
Sure.
encountering them again, and that's precious. That contributes more to the story than people can realize sometimes. Um, and if something bad happens, they lose a level, or like I had a character that they had a game where they were rescuing people from a burning tavern, and each round I had various things that would go wrong longer and longer. And it got to the point that if they didn't get everybody out in time, there would be some casualties. And it turned out that the casualty was a small boy that they just was he had just a series of bad rolls. He was too scared to come when they told him to come, and when somebody went up to get him and they weren't fast enough, and just bad rolls. And so there was a collapse, and the paladin survived, but the boy didn't. And the paladin was willing to sacrifice one of their levels in order to get that boy back to life. And that was an incredible moment. And it affected that character, and he's still, now to this day, is still one level lower than the rest of his party, and is willing to deal with that consequence because of what it meant for his character in that moment. And realizing that is something I really think that only comes with experience. Um, and you just keep doing it and keep experiencing and realizing that sometimes when the bad thing happens, or even the worst thing happens, that the story goes on, and it might be the end of that particular character's contribution to it, but I'm reminded of classic Dragonlance, and Storm Brightblade died. One of the main characters dies
Yeah.
in that book, or even Game of Thrones,
Ned
or
Stark.
actually the Ned Stark dies. Main character dies. What
In the first
resonating
book.
effect does that
The
have?
first book,
Yeah,
the main
exactly.
character, they drop his head off.
Going down throughout the rest of the books. Um, it's it's tough, and it takes a level of maturity to deal with. But it it is just the best seasoning. I think it really contributes something to a game that nothing else, in a way that nothing else does. If it's handled well by the DM, it needs a certain touch, as opposed to, oh well, killed you, haha, gotcha.
Gotcha. So
You know.
so how would I think that there's a lot of GMs who want to try to create that, to find that touch, to find that moment. What could you say to a GM for looking for the moment? Because I think from my perspective, it's about the person more so than the
Mhm.
character. It's about the
Yeah.
individual playing the character. What should people keep an eye on for as a GM for when that's appropriate to kind of push the player? Because really you're pushing the player a little bit to
Mhm.
that moment.
I mean, that question applies not just to a role playing game. It can apply to just a life situation. Any kind of job, any kind of social situation. How far can I push this person? Are we on the same page
Mhm.
emotionally, dramatically? Um, and you just communication. If you've communicated with them outside of the game, or have a good session zero where you set expectations, um, and if you've been a player, if you've created a beloved character that bad things have happened to, um, and you've persevered and found a way to, incorporate that loss into the next character you make, or um, one of my favorite characters had an alignment change that happened over a course of several sessions, and by the time he was really had become evil, I was having to do things that was actually harming my other players, the other characters. That was very hard, but I got
Yeah.
redeemed, and it made it important for that group to redeem that character. But having that experience as a player, you get to appreciate what it can mean to the people that you're playing with when you're the DM. Um, and it really just is, don't be callous. um, Understand, there's different types of games. There's your beer and pretzels game where you're going, oh, let's play a couple hours of Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and then there's your game where you've really worked hard to create a, a story with the group, and it can be devastating for everybody, but the DM too, when a character dies,
Yeah.
where you realize you've come to that moment and everything turns on the roll of this die, and if it's not the die you want, then
Such
we're
as
saying
life.
goodbye. That's really hard, but knowing that it's hard, and still being willing to confront it, and being willing to incorporate that tragedy into the story in a mature and sensitive way. That is something that just you apply it to every aspect of your life. When you have to give somebody bad news, or you
Yeah.
have to, if you, you have to ground your child, or you have to,
Yeah.
anything like that.
Sure.
There's ways to do it. But I don't know necessarily that it's something that can be trained more, as much as experienced, and it's something you grow into. And
Yeah.
well, there's many things that you can teach somebody to be a good GM. Technically, you can memorize the things in the book. You can learn the technology. There's step-by-step process for that. The specific thing that we're talking about, I'm not so sure that that's something that can be taught. I think that's something that just has to be experienced. You have to have had it happen to you, or have
Yeah.
witnessed it happen. Um,
Empathy,
Empathy. Yeah.
experience, understanding, and being knowing people, knowing
Yeah.
who they are, and um, knowing where you can take things. That,
Oh
that
yes.
that's one thing with where the hobby is at now that I find challenging, because I know that it's really important to make sure people are comfortable. And I think that anybody who works at least with RPG Club, or any GM I've ever met, wants players to feel really comfortable at their table. This is our place, our time. I don't think I haven't never met a GM who cares about anything about, like, other than the person, like what you look like, who you are, any of that stuff, other than just, hey, you're here, I'm glad you're here. But there's also, I think, the counterpoint to it, where we want to try as GMs to move the story and push people to have those emotional reactions and moments that can also be very challenging. And so I find it's a hard or a hard path to navigate.
I mean, there's a reason why. There's a reason why role playing is a tool for psychoanalysis. I mean, it can be very powerful, and you need to wield that power responsibly.
For sure.
Said better by someone at some point. When is the line? Great power, something like that. I don't know.
Great power, something, dark side.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's one that's definitely something, you saw a little bit of it, I think, in at least in some of the servers in World of Warcraft and stuff like that, where people really used that format as escapism and as a way to really RP and really have that alter ego. But that started with Dungeons and Dragons, and then it went over and to LARPing and all this stuff. And people really get into it and use it as a way to deal with all the real life crap they've got going on in the world. Being able to use that imaginary world as a place to air out your demons, even if that means just imagining slaughtering things in a very gruesome and violent way. That can be very cathartic. But also in the same way, having playing a character that's gone through loss, and playing that out as a different character, you can be, you end up getting into some very I don't want to say dangerous ground, but very potent ground, I suppose. With if depending on how far you go with your role playing, and it needs to be addressed and respected.
Yes, and I think it's I mean, you said it. You said what needed to be said right there. I don't need to add anything to that.
Fair enough.
It is a potent ground, I think, when we dig beneath the layers of why we're actually at the table, besides I'm just exploring my character, and we're fighting the goblins, and then we all learn why we're really fighting, and it could be challenging. We've been talking now for about an hour. I feel like we've had a really good conversation. What are you up to professionally right now that people should keep an eye out for? What's on?
I'm doing this. I run 8 games a week. I don't think I can do more. I've got a pretty good schedule going on. I do a podcast based in Dragonlance called Echoes of Krynn. You can find that at echoesofkrynn.com.
And I'll put that in the description on the YouTube, so that way it'll be down there for folks.
And that's me and a bunch of friends that we run an actual play, and then we edit out all of the all the junk, and we managed to create it. It's a bit more spontaneous than a radio drama, but a little less chaotic than just being present at a table. And we edit it, we curate it with good music and some minor sound effects, and that's a lot of fun. And I trying to get a little bit of a voice acting career off the ground. But that's kind of trying to figure out time to put that in the cracks as I spend time working on games. But for the most part, I'm always working on creating what's coming up next in everybody's game. And I've got 2 Descendant to Avernus games, 2 Rime of the Frostbane games, a Storm King's Thunder game, a Curse of Strahd game, and a Ghosts of Saltmarsh game, and I feel like I'm missing one. Is that 8?
Stormwreck? Did you mention Stormwreck?
Stormwreck. Oh, yeah, that is yeah, that's right. Stormwreck is just ending. That's a game of brand new players, and we're going to start doing. That's not moving on to a module per se. We're going to start taking some of the shorter adventures that are in books like Candlekeep Mysteries and
Oh, nice.
Keys of the Golden Vault and things like that, and doing a little
Some
modular stuff like that to
pick and play.
go forward with them. So that's the 8th one. Correct. Thank you.
Do you have any openings? I feel like most of your games are either booked up or almost
Yeah, I
fully
think at
booked
the
up.
moment I have every slot filled, which is amazing. But there's always things changing. You know, people's schedules change and all that. So there's rarely a month that goes by that I don't have at least one opening come up. Just through the just as life
Yeah.
happens. You know, people whose schedules change and what have you.
And this is for those watching after the fact. This, a month down the line, when we have our new platform at rpgclub.net, when that's
Excited
up
about
and
that.
running. Yeah, when that's up and running, folks will be able to see your games much more easily in terms of what's available, and they'll be able to contact you and kind of jump in there. But I don't want that to monopolize, or that's a discussion for a later date. But it'll be a lot easier for people to find you and access what you're doing. And when that's the time comes, I'll put that link down below so that we can make sure people can access what you're doing more easily. So, well, Sean, I appreciate you being here, man. I appreciate your time, and
My
I appreciate
pleasure.
everybody out there just hanging out. Yeah, it's always great to talk to you, and you do great work across the board. You're an interesting guy with a lot of talents, and so I'm glad
Thank you very much.
glad you're with us.
See you next time.
All right. I'm gonna log us off, everybody. I appreciate you being here, and it's been a good one.